So, hi everyone, and welcome to Write Your Narrative. Today in the studio, I'm going to be talking with one of the Miami legends, graffiti guy who's been painting for quite some time now in Miami and in Detroit with his crew, the FDC crew. Mr. Grabster. Grabster, how are you today?
Good, man. Happy to be here with you.
Great to have you on the podcast. So the FDC crew, the Forever Dropping Funk, or I also found Few Distinct Chosen. Is that an older name for a crew? Is that a different crew? Is that...
Yes, the original name is Few Distinct Chosen, and then we started, making other acronyms from Dade County, Funkadelic Crew, and others, like you said, Forever Dropping Funk. But yes, Few Distinct Chosen was the original name.
It was, yes.
Yes. And we established in 2002.
Yeah, so 22 years, a little more than 22 years now, rocking with the crew. You've been with the crew pretty much from the beginning, or you came on board a little later on?
I came a little later. I started painting in 97, 98 with just, I would say I started doing graffiti 97, 98 with tags and throwies, but then really started filling pieces like 99, 2000. I think 1999 was the first piece I went all the way through with filled and colored. And I got put down in FDC a little later, like 2005. And so, yeah. Rock with them for 20 years, yeah.
Wow, so that's pretty amazing, and always with the same crew. Have you been invited to some other crew? I know some artists are working with different crews, or...
Yeah, I started with FDC for a while, and then I got put down in WST, which is Wild Style Technicians. They're based out of San Diego, but they're pretty spread across the country and international. They're a hip-hop crew. And I say that because it goes beyond just graffiti. They're a well-known clothing brand like Tribal, was also from San Diego. And the WST guys, I met them a long time ago, in my earlier years, breakdancing. And they, were hooking me up with clothes for me and my crew to break in. I was definitely bigger into breaking in those years than graffiti. And so much that the WSTs, I gave them a spot to paint, and I didn't paint with them because I was shy, because I was like, no, I'm not good enough. I don't want to paint with these guys. I'm kind of toy, and they're like, man, painting. So I was like, I'll paint when it's ready. And then years later, continuing the connection with them, they put me down with the Wild Style Technicians. But FDC is my true crew. That's my brothers. That's who I came up with. Other crews like WST and also ABL, which stands for Academia Brasileira de Letras. It's a crew that means the Brazilian Academy of Letters. And it's a crew created by Binho, where he kind of made a collective of Brazilian graffiti writers from across the country there that focus on letters. And I'm the first guy outside of Brazil in that crew because, just from all my visits in Brazil and painting with them, they put me down. Mm-hmm. So these other crews, I'll push them. Sometimes I'll put them on the wall, but I feel like those are more like all-star like entities of, they gather artists from different places, where FDC is we all came up together, practiced together, learned together, grew together, and developed each other's styles, And
FDC is a Miami crew.
Yes, Miami-based crew.
Miami-based crew, yes.
We got a couple guys outside the state now that moved out of Florida, and a couple outside the country. But for the most part, Miami.
But you do spend a lot of time between Miami, where you do your graph, you do your art, and Detroit. This is something, it's more like a family related, that you have to go to Detroit, you spend a lot of time over there. We briefly talked about some project that you have with the city of Detroit and doing something with the youth, teaching some of the kids to do some art stuff, some graffiti stuff in Detroit, which is also something really, really big. It's your involvement and a lot of people who are involved with the art community, showing the kids to do the right thing and how to eventually discover themselves being artists or not.
Yes, I've been splitting my time in the past couple of years in Detroit. I have a new baby who's 10 months old now, and with my girl from Detroit. So that kind of sparked the move over there. But I still have my base in Florida. So I'm kind of splitting between two cities, have two different nests, as we could say.
All right.
And I built a studio there in Detroit so I could do more of my fine art stuff in the studio. And I'm, getting my feet wet over there. It's hard in our profession to go to a new city and just be like, hey, I'm here. What's up?
Yes.
Where's the walls? Where's the money? So you got to kind of make a splash,
Make a splash,
and
yes.
people are more and more knowing about me over there, and it's different from Miami. It's very different with the arts and murals. How it's very easy for me to get work here because I've been putting in work for over 20 years. So people know me, and it's always these connections I've built over all those years. And then you got to kind of start fresh in a new city. And the first projects I did for Detroit were through the city of Detroit for City Walls, and I did a big 70-foot mural of Marvin Gaye and very Detroit music themed, like a Motown mural. I call it Motown Mercy. And that same initiative, the City Walls, they're having me do, like you mentioned, a mentorship program. So these aren't really kids. They're artists. They're adults, but they're still have stuff to learn. Some of them been painting just a few years, or some of them, are new to murals. They've started with canvases and they want to get more experience with murals. So the city's given us a grant to make that happen, to coach these younger artists who don't have the mural experience that I have, or some of the other mentors they got. And yeah, it should be fun. I'm gonna, try to take their art to the next level, ask them what they want to learn from me, whether it's spray can techniques or even the business side of it.
Yeah,
so
which is something
cool.
very important when you touch on the business side of the art, and learning how to price yourself whenever you do a mural, or whenever you do sometime a canvas. How do I price a canvas? Is it based on the years? Is it based on so many factors come into place when you need to price yourself? We know a lot of artists are struggling with this, and how to be fair, make some money at the end of the day, because this is a business that you want to do. So how do you actually price a canvas yourself as an artist? How do you approach, if this is something that you can share, maybe someone who's listening to the podcast, okay, I have that 18-24 piece, whatever this is, how do I price myself?
I like to put time into account when pricing, because definitely size, but sometimes time. There could be a canvas where it might not be the biggest canvas, but I spend weeks and weeks on it, and I compare that to how long it would have taken me to do a mural and how much I charge for murals. So yeah, the canvas is smaller than the mural, but it took me just as long or longer than it would took me to do a mural because of the details. Yeah. So I think time is my biggest factor, and all the time I've put into the game. Learning these techniques. That goes into it too, because people always question that, like, how come this artist could sell this for this much? And it's like, it's correct. Because of his decades he's put in. Now he's accumulated this value. When he touches a canvas, yeah, it's the same size as yours. You guys might both paint a similar subject, but you're not that person. You don't have that story. There's value in that person's legacy and history. And I think you got to put a price tag on that. It's like two people. You might see a canvas and it's like, oh, but look who did this canvas. This person's been in the game for a while and they've earned that. And developed.
You have an end versus someone who maybe started a year or two ago in his little neighborhood,
yeah,
but which is valuable too. Everybody has to go through all these steps, and we learn from that.
Yeah, and another thing too is, like, I was always an artist as a kid, but in the art scene, I come from the graffiti scene. Like, I'm a graffiti writer first, and my following is mainly graffiti. I'm known for my graffiti. I've traveled to different countries because of graffiti. So now, and I've been painting murals, and now getting into this street art world or gallery world, it's different. I know that I'm not as seasoned in the gallery scene as I am in the graffiti scene. So I keep that in mind too, realistic. Like, there might be people with who don't do graffiti or a smaller following than me, but they've been in galleries for years and putting in work in galleries and art shows where I might not have as much experience than someone else in that. So I know I'm trying to grow in that side of me, in the fine art, and I don't, get too ahead of myself because I know that I've put so much work into graffiti that now I'm trying to, past few years, really transition more into fine art, murals and street art. And so, I don't get upset that if I'm not as known in the street art scene as I am in the graffiti scene, because one thing I want to carry with me is the knowledge of graffiti and teach that to people, because some people don't see the fine art that is in graffiti, in style writing, and how much skill that takes.
Oh yes, it does take a lot of skills and practice, and knowing the colors, knowing what works. The scale sometimes of the murals, of the walls that you guys doing is so huge compared to a small canvas. Of course, you want to try to fit everything your style into a smaller piece sometimes. Actually, a lot of graffiti writers don't even go into the canvas world. They don't want to get into this. It's very hard for some artists to translate the work that you do on the streets, legal or not, into a smaller piece. I mean, it's just different. And you actually do some of the work under also a different name. You don't go necessarily under Grabsters. You go, when you do some commission work, it's something, you kind of differentiate both sides of the work. Yes,
I mean, my job is a muralist. I've been working as a muralist for 20 years now, and I have my mural company, Funky Paint, and I'll sign Funky Paint when I'm doing some mural work. But if it's anything that's my own design, that's Grabster design, I'm signing Grabster because I put my name behind it, because this is my vision, rather than me painting, a mural for someone that's corporate kind of work. So there's a fine line there. When I feel like, hey, this is my art here, then I'll sign it with my artist name. But if I feel like I'm just, painting this for this company and making their logo look cool, sometimes I'll just sign with my mural company. But as far as the art, there's graffiti artists who sometimes they just want to do their graffiti name and put it on a canvas, and
correct,
and we'll get upset that doesn't sell to fine art collectors. And I think there's a bunch of artists that are good examples of artists that could actually take graffiti and break it apart or infuse it into the art, where somebody could look at it and be like, oh, like this piece behind me with the arrow, like, oh, it's abstract. It's an abstract piece. Or like the piece I painted for Iota has graffiti elements, has 80s elements. The arrow, which is as old as time in graffiti. I like putting arrows in my art, where to some people it's just arrow, but to other people they'll see that that's graffiti. There's artists like Stare and Dash that they'll do some graffiti abstract work, and to the average person they just see abstract shapes and colors.
They do.
But to graffiti writers, they're like, that's an E, that's an S, like they zoomed in, that's the inside of a letter. And I think that's very clever. Another person like Quest from Canada, people who've gotten really good at selling graffiti without the buyer even knowing it's graffiti. They don't see the letters in it, but we see the letters. And I've done some things like that, deconstruct letters, where sometimes my abstract shape, people are like, oh, it's just an abstract shape, but to me it's a part of my G, it's a piece of this. And you don't have to put graffiti into your art. It could be graffiti techniques you put into your art,
Oh, definitely.
Like this is a graffiti fill, and I put it in an abstract piece,
Yeah. So talking about those abstract pieces that you're doing, if they are, what are some of the design that you always go back to? You mentioned that arrow, and then you also have that color palette on one side. Usually that is something that you are always coming back to it. Even on your murals, we see those the different color blocks that you use, different colors.
Right. Some of the elements that I incorporate into my art is the color chart, where I started doing, when I'm designing, I would make a little color palette like on the iPad, and you take those colors. And then I remember once I just had the design and I sent it to somebody, and they're like, I like the little color chart. And I was like, oh man, I forgot to remove the color chart. I just left it. But I'm like, it looks cool. So I started leaving it on these designs and doing it intentionally. Like sometimes I'll do circles and they're just dots on the iPad, or squares, or like a gradient. And it just shows the colors that I'm using in the piece, and it adds, you know, something cool, like a flair to it. Another thing I add is my swirls, which comes from my signature. You know, when I do the MB for Marcus Borges, I kind of swirl the M and I swirl the B. So when you see these swirls in my art, they're not just random, they're kind of part of my actual signature, you know, which I stole from Michael Jordan.
Oh,
I used to copy, when I was a kid, I used to copy Michael Jordan's autograph. And the way he loops the M, because I have like the M for Marcus, so I stole Michael Jordan's M. And then he did like the J with the loop, and my B is the loop. So I kind of stole that from Michael Jordan. I started signing my art with it. Yeah. And now I do it big as heck, you know, like parts of my signature. And what else? And then arrows, like I said. One of my big influences is Mayer. He's a legend and you know, a mentor. We've sat and had several conversations in my studio, and he's known for his arrow sculptures, and I really wanted to dive into arrow art. And then something else I incorporate is like my spheres. If you notice, my pieces will have either 3 circles. I like using the numbers of 3 and 6. These are recurring numbers in my art. They're meaningful. And the spheres are I call them power cores, and they're kind of alien technology, you know, like batteries, like that's where the source of energy comes from. So sometimes they'll have lightning coming out of them, or they're circling the piece, like that's what created it. They could be forms of like a spaceship or something scanning the area, you know. So kind of like Transformers, where they're aliens, but they're not made from flesh. They're made of mechanical, you know, robots. That's kind of like what I do with these retro-futuristic.
I was just going to use that word, futuristic. It's something very present in your work. It's very futuristic. It's got a little bit of the 1950s elements that is very squarish, there's a lot of maybe technology in your work.
Yeah,
something
like you said 50s. I like that because like I say 80s because that's where I grew up, but it is a reflection of, that's why I call it retro-futurism. It's what they thought the future was going to look like in the 50s and 60s, 70s, you know?
Exactly,
so, I even like those cars when you look at, like, you know, the DeLorean in Back to the Future. Like, in the future, we got to make a futuristic looking car. And everything was so boxy, you know? And then the futuristic cars of, like, the 2000s are so round. Like,
they're so round,
so sleek and round, where I think it was cool, like, even like the speakers, you know, how it shows the speaker sound, like the bars and the greens, and it's almost like the bars I put in my artwork. Like, I like that version of futurism, you know, where it's simplified, you know,
it's
like
very simplified. Yes,
the old movies I used to watch, and the last thing I'll say about my artwork is nostalgia. I aim for nostalgia. I do things that are nostalgic. The graffiti came from the 70s and 80s, so these movies I watched as a kid, they were from the 70s and 80s and 90s, and I try to put that into my artwork. So it kind of connects to graffiti too, because these are the video games I was from the 80s that were growing as graffiti was getting painted on trains. These were the movies the graffiti writers were watching. These are the video games the graffiti writers were playing. Yeah. These are the comic books that I grew up looking at. So I try to incorporate everything from like my inner child, you know, like these are the things I thought I was cool when I was a kid. And if I could paint anything, what would I paint as a kid? How would I, you know, make that kid proud, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And you use a lot of colors also that are very Miami. I mean, all these turquoise, all these pinks and all those different shades were also very popular back in the 50s. And if you look at this cartoons, I think it was called the Jetsons, where you have all this futuristic, it's much later on, I think it's when 70s or 80s, but there's that kind of like funky, which goes well with the name of the crew, of course. Yeah. It's like a funky design and very Miami in your color palette that you use.
Yeah, I like to reflect my surroundings, my habitat, atmosphere. So if like I'm in Miami, I want to incorporate the sky, sunset, the colors of all the water, the architect of the Art Deco architect, like the stripe, you know, the checkered patterns of the grids I put in my artwork resemble, you know, like tile work from Miami in the 80s. So with that said, I'm also Brazilian, so I like to incorporate, Brazilian colors, Brazilian birds, and I'll get to the birds too because I'm kind of a bird nerd, and that's why I do that. So I don't just paint things that I think are trending, like, oh, people are painting flamingos, so let me go paint flamingos. Like that's and that's something I teach to artists too that are learning. It's like, don't just try to paint what other people are painting, or like you think is trendy, or like, oh, I saw that and it was cool, that's why I painted it. Like, do things that come from you. If you're not into that, you don't have to paint that. Like, I'll be driving by and like, oh, look, this osprey carrying a fish. Like, I see all these different birds, like I scope them out. The blue heron, for example, I feel like everyone's painting flamingos in Miami, right? And then
yes.
I'm like, I'm gonna do a blue heron because that's my spirit animal. I see him, I would go fishing with my dad and see the blue heron. They're so big, and the way they hunt. And I'm like, that's a cool bird, man. It's like a cobra, like a snake. The way it snaps at fish. And I'm like, and I feel like after I started painting these blue herons, you start seeing them more in murals.
Yes.
Like, I guess it's trending now, but yeah, there's a real connection with me and the parrots, from that you see in Florida and Brazil, and the blue heron. And like, with that said, now being in Detroit, I did the Motown mural. The colors are completely different from any Miami colors.
Sure.
They're like old 70s Motown poster colors. I looked up old posters, and I did another design where the colors are like the fall colors, like orange, like Carhartt colors, the colors you would see in the fall, and it looks cold. And it's like a Detroit color palette that I did because I'm up there. So that's what's inspiring me or influencing me at the moment.
Exactly. And then the mural will be staying in Detroit when you leave. I mean, you are painting for the community anyway, so might as well make these people feel, okay, this is a Miami artist, even if they don't know who you were or who you are, they're going to appreciate the art because they say this is a good representation of who we are.
Exactly. Like, would it make sense for me to do my... like palm trees in Detroit.
No, it would not.
Artwork, but if I'm doing all these oranges and burgundies and red and yellows, and it looks like the fall trees that are falling around, it relates more to them, than some of the more tropical stuff I'm used to painting. And I like to keep that in mind. Even the 20 by 20 piece I did for AOTA.
For the AOTA show, yes.
Yeah, I thought the bird, and I'm like, man, I wanted to vibe with this kind of Tuscan, like the colors kind of remind you more of desert, more of like Sedona, like Arizona. Like, I thought of a hawk out in that atmosphere.
So that was a hawk.
So those are the colors I put for it. Same. Somebody might buy that piece who lives in Phoenix, Arizona.
Exactly.
Like, this matches our decor here, So
it matches the pillow on their couches.
Yeah, it's a good thing that as an artist. I mean, it's cool to have your color scheme, or if you do a series in that color scheme, but it's also fun to explore different things, because if you're trying to sell art to different people, it's good to have black and white pieces. It's good to have muted pieces.
Absolutely.
Like last year's AOTA mural is very different color palette than you're used to seeing from me. I kept it simple. It was kind of like the osprey, browns and like yellow and denim blues. So some people said it reminds them of like a working man's outfit, like jeans and boots.
I can see that. I can see that totally. So talking about AOTA, we just finished that AOTA festival here in Fort Lauderdale, the Avenue of the Art Festival. This was the third year of the festival. And you were commissioned somehow to design a beer label for the beer company that they're working with, and that beautiful mural. You have those two beautiful women on the side of the building at Thrive District, which is the art district here in Fort Lauderdale. So what was your inspiration for these two faces and the design behind that beer label?
Yes, I was fortunate to get selected to do the beer label this year. Thankful to Maxence for that, and I thought it was a cool highlight. And all they told me was the beer's name is Deja Vu.
Correct.
And they said to, have yellow in it because it's like a lemon meringue. So I said, okay, I'll make sure there's yellow in it and kind of a tropical vibe. And I just wanted it to be eye candy. you know, and the theme of this year's festival was 3D. So I went back to my 3D style, which I've kind of, the past couple of years, I've been doing more flat collage style of my art. And I put the 3D on hold for a second, but I went back to my 2017, like 3D inspiration, even the wall break, the way it gives that depth, that 3D effect was, I got that from the first mural I did in Fat Village when I moved into that studio. So it was kind of a tribute to my old 3D style, but mixing it with the new stuff I'm doing. And when I thought deja vu, I'm like, how can I illustrate deja vu? I thought of, you know, this woman's face repeating itself. She's kind of looking with a puzzled look on her face, like,
okay,
this looks familiar. I've been here before. And then I took the arrow and wrapped it around her head, kind of like the world is spinning, like it's looping, you know.
It's looping, yes.
Like this moment in time is looping, and that's what the arrow represents. The looping, her head is in a loop. Like, I've been here before, and you can see she's looking one way, and then the other face is like a past version of herself who's been there before. So I wanted to have that duality to duplicate her looking two different ways, and then I wanted it to be eye candy. That's where the colors came in. I just got the brightest colors from my palette, and I said I want to, you know, really make it look bright and colorful and popping out of the wall.
You sure did it, because I mean, this wall, which is right like on the end of the building or the beginning of the building, really pops up. I mean, the colors, the scale, and everything is just perfect, and hoping it's gonna last.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's gonna last. You know, the Thrive owners really love it. You know, I could paint. I've over the years of my training and practicing, I try to be very well-rounded artist. You know, by that I mean doing realism, letters, abstract, geometric. I try to incorporate as many skills as I can into my art, and I don't love doing portraits. I don't like painting people. I do it when I have to. So it was a real challenge for me. Like, okay, here I go. I haven't painted a face in a while. And when I do paint people, I'd rather do cartoony or comic book style. You know, it's not realism. Like in this mural, I didn't do skin tones or hyper realism. No, but the anatomy is realism. The anatomy is real, and I was like, you know, the nose, everything has to be on point. Where if I was doing like a comic book girl, it'd be more flat, less colors, and a little easier. Where I prefer doing, because I love animation art, like my Alien, Geo, and I like doing the more you know, comic book style. But I wanted to, with this festival being 3D, I wanted the faces to be 3D. I wanted it to be impressive.
So you really push yourself.
I tried to impress people with skills to show, like, yeah, I could do that too. I could paint faces too, you know. I could paint realism. But again, I don't love using the exact skin tone.
Okay,
like
we're not going to ask you to redo the wall again, to do another portrait.
So I made it colorful, at least.
Not anytime soon.
Changing colors on the faces to make it more fun, you know.
Moving forward now, what is your next project that you can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple projects that I'm going to start, and there's some that are pending, you know, waiting for approval, things like that. We all know how that's like, you know, for the big ones. But I always, you know, keep myself busy with smaller mural jobs. A big part of my career or my work that I don't always post or people know about is I do a lot of live art for corporate events, like at least twice a month. So those pay the bills, and they're fun sometimes because they're quick, a few hours. And so I always have those going on, and murals for my company. But one thing I have that I'm waiting on is the FIFA World Cup poster design for Miami, which I was one of the selected artists, along with some friends of mine, selected to design a poster for the World Cup coming 2026 to the U.S. And I'm so excited about that. I mean, I'm a huge soccer fan. And
being Brazilian.
Like talking about the being Brazilian, yeah. And talking about, you know, the inner child, like the younger version of me would never dream of doing artwork for FIFA World Cup. That's crazy. My third birthday was World Cup themed, you know.
Wow.
My fourth birthday, like like when I put that Brazil jersey on, it's like a superhero costume. And so I did my design. I got my fingers crossed. They're going to announce it next month or in a few weeks. They're going to announce the winner. But even if you don't, even if I don't win, everyone's a winner in this project because they're highlighting each artist. They interviewed each artist. There will be other stuff for us in the works. But yeah, that's about as much as I could talk about that. So that's one thing I'm excited about.
That is something we mentioned with Serge not too long ago. We had a great conversation. There's so many art projects that are related to either the music world here when they do the big music festival, or to the sports, all these major sports events that are happening here in Florida. And there are some with the F1, with the FIFA. I've seen some of the posts that you just mentioned, some of the artists that we both know. We all know getting in competition for this poster. So there's a lot of work here in Florida. That's why we talked about it earlier. It's just how to get yourself into this business aspect of the work. And FIFA, it's great. And the way they are embracing the art and the local art community, it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's something we do have being in South Florida that to an advantage, like comparing with Detroit. Like Detroit just had the Super Bowl there, so that was a big event that they hired a lot of artists for, you know. But Miami constantly has events, you know. We there's so many corporate events that happen in Miami that we don't know of. But you know, if the company's based out of Montana, you think they want to have their corporate annual event in Montana? No, they want to do it in Miami. They want to take people, you know, it's the sun and the palm trees. So a lot of businesses from other states come here to party, you know, or to do their events. And that's good for Miami artists because these companies come to you and say, we want Art Basel at our event. We want, you know, Wynwood at our event.
Exactly. We want something special.
You know, where they don't have that in other cities. They're not necessarily doing that all the time in other cities. I mean, there's mural initiatives and projects and mural festivals all the time. But I think Miami, like you said, Formula One and the baseball World Cup, like
the tennis, also the
U.S. Open, the Miami Open. There's all the music festivals. Miami's a hub for that, and I hope all the, you know, artists take advantage of it. And we don't have to be so competitive with each other because there's so much work for everyone. You know, you might not get this, but you'll get that, or this person gets that. And we're all, I mean, as far as I can say, we still remain friends. All of our artist friends who compete for these jobs, you know, we're mutual because we see each other. We're like, hey, congrats on that. And they'll turn to me and like, congrats on that, you know.
Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't have to be.
Like you say, at the end of the day, you guys all winners, because, I mean, this is what brings this community together, and we all have a really, really nice sense of a friendship. We all know each other. There's a group of 20, 30, 40 artists who are always kind of doing some work together. And at the end of the day, you're always going to be with the FDC crew. You're all going to be, always going to be an artist.
That's funny, you know, you mentioned that because it definitely in the art scene and the mural art scene and street art, yeah, it's always, hey, good to see you. Hey, what's up? You know, it's very easy for these artists to get along. I wish I could say the same about graffiti. Graffiti is not the same, you know. It's not like
quite.
Hey, what's up? What do you write? Oh, I write. You know, like not always. Some, you know, we do get along with artists from outside.
Of course,
but for the most part, graffiti writers stick with their clique. They stick with their crew.
They do.
They usually just paint with their friends, even if they are friends with other guys and other crews. It's they don't mingle as much as street artists and gallery scene, and that's something that it's just part of the culture, you know. It's also competitive. We also have mutual friends, but yeah, there's kind of a pride of like, oh, our crew is pushing it here, your crew's pushing, you know, and it keeps us on our toes. It keeps us trying to improve and get better. But definitely when I travel for graffiti, it's different in other countries too. You know, it's a worldwide thing, but depending on what country you go to, I'm telling you, graffiti is a different animal. You know, like I went to Brazil and there was a little graffiti jam, and I'm telling you, I went there, I'm a stranger, nobody knows me. Everyone at the event stepped up, said hi, hey, what's up, you know, offering me beers and barbecue. And, you know, I try to give them money for like the beer and food. They're like, no, keep your money. It's what, you know, and it's, I mean, this is so different. You know, sometimes in Miami, we'll we're all, you know, next to each other.
You mentioned Bino earlier. If he was around, I'm sure. I mean,
Bino, I mean, that guy's an ambassador.
Such a legend.
Bino, you know, I've been seeing his work since the 90s. I used to have Bino, you know, cutouts of magazines, and he's an OG in São Paulo, in Brazil, from São Paulo. Everyone knows him, and you know, he's a good example of like a guy who's been traveling the world, you know, making these connections with graffiti, and it opens your eyes, you know, because sometimes you're in your home city and like, I don't want to paint with that guy. I don't really paint with that. That guy's not too good, or this person, I don't know. And then you go to some other countries and like, you paint with anyone, you know, like, the guy might not even be that good, but you know what? He let you stay at his house. He's a good guy. He gave you rides. And why are you going to paint with that guy? He's so cool, you know?
So cool, yes.
Even though he might not be that great, or vice versa. You're painting with these machines, these people that are, oh my God, man, I'm telling you, it humbles you. Traveling will humble you, because the places I've been, you know, in Germany, Italy, and Canada, where you're painting next to guys, they finish twice as fast as you, and it's so intricate and clean, and you're like, man, I gotta practice.
I gotta go back home. Practice.
The talent from France and Europe and Italy, like so many good artists, and they're fast and humble, and it's cool. You come back and you realize, like, man, this needs to be fun. We can't let it take the fun out of it too. You know what I'm saying? If fun for you is doing illegal, more illegal, that's great. That changes to you when you get older. When I was younger, you know, the thrill, I needed the thrill. Now I enjoy setting up a tent, barbecuing, and painting a piece, spending 2 days on a wall with friends. That's fun for me, you know, where, you know, still painting a train in the middle of the night is so much fun. I can't stop doing that either, you know. So you really, it's good. I don't like to put definition on graffiti, where some people are like, if you're not painting a train, it's not graffiti. If it's not illegal, it's not graffiti. If it's doing, you know, I'm not trying to define graffiti, because it's something to everyone else. I know great legendary graffiti writers who all they do is hand styles. Yeah. And they're legends in New York. And
Absolutely,
the guy,
I can say that.
Yeah, this guy's a legend in all he you know, or just do throwies. There's legendary graffiti writers who are throwy artists. So I don't like to put a definition where like, it's not graffiti unless you do 3D or wild style. Yeah. Some people only do wild style. Some people only do hand styles. And like, good for them. That's what they mastered. And some people try to do it all. You know, I try to be well-rounded, because it keeps it, you know, I wanted to keep it fun and interesting for me.
It's got to be fun. And I love to finish the interview with this, because art has to be fun, and you guys have to have some fun. Of course, it took, like you said, more than 20 years to come today to the artist that you are, to be recognized, to be well respected, because I believe you have earned the respect from your crew, from all the people that you're working with. And well, congratulations on all that. I mean, 20 years, over 20 years of putting the hard work, like you say, legal, illegal. At the end of the day, it's not what's important.
Yeah, it's what you're passionate about, and if it's, you know, makes you happy, you know, doing characters, whatever. I'd like to keep it interesting for myself, so I don't get bored, and I don't see myself getting bored. I think the last, you know, one thing I want to say, that it was an answer that came out in one interview that I was doing in Wynwood during Art Basel. Somebody asked me what I wanted to see more, you know, and I said graffiti. I think graffiti needs to be shined more, needs to be respected more as an art form, because there's so much science and knowledge behind it, and skill. Because there's some street artists who could fade all day, but they can't do a clean straight line, and they see that and they're like, whoa, true, how'd this guy do this? And when people come up to your art and say, what's the message here? You know, style is the message in graffiti. Why can't style be the message? Is that not important enough of a message? Like style, something that looks cool. Like, that's kind of why we do graffiti. Like, I want to make cool looking letters, and I want it to be appreciated more. I feel like watching what happened in Wynwood, where people, you know, before we used to just get permission from building owners and do graffiti productions, and now less and less the owners want graffiti. They want, you know, if it has an animal, a face, a woman, flowers, you know, then they'll say yes. But if it doesn't have any of that, they might not want it. But we can't complain about that as graffiti writers, because graffiti is about finding your own space, man. You know, we lose walls all the time. There's places we used to paint. Now it got gentrified. There's places that used to be abandoned. Now it's not abandoned. We as graffiti artists, it's our job to go and find new places to paint. That's the fun part of it. You know, we can't sit and complain about getting legal walls because,
it doesn't have the cause. It doesn't happen.
But as long as people remember that there wouldn't be Wynwood art if it wasn't for graffiti, because graffiti started the art on the walls there. It was the first form of art there. So there wouldn't be Art Basel if it wasn't for graffiti. And I like to highlight that. And every time I'm, educating someone, or every interview, or every time I'm talking to other people, I like to tell them the importance of the graffiti because, now every street artist uses a spray can. Before, our fine artists only use brush. Now it's like they gotta, people see you're working a gallery and they're like, okay, I want a mural. And you can't be like, I don't do murals, So you gotta credit graffiti writers for developing the skills with the can that everyone's using today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Grabster. This is the time we have for the interview. Hopefully a lot of people are going to be listening to it because you gave us a real insight of the world of what you're doing all these years that you've been putting up some work on the street and on canvas now. So, Grabster, thank you so much again. Guys, we'll see you next week for the next episode. We'll see you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.